Alright, what's up guys? This is Morey.
This is Pat from the Erie Better Beer Bureau. Today we're looking at two beers from Alltech Brewing Company out of Lexington, Kentucky. They're Kentucky Bourbon Barrel Series. We have the Bourbon Barrel Stout and Bourbon Barrel Ale.
Yes, the Bourbon Barrel Ale is basically kind of a pale ale, brewed and then aged in bourbon barrels. Not for very long, but it doesn't need to be very long with such a light beer. It's 8.5%. This bottle's got a couple months on it, but it's still within its freshness date. This is the newer beer. They just started doing this one not too long ago. It's actually a bourbon barrel stout brewed with coffee and aged on some coffee. So it's more of a like bourbon coffee stout, really.
Just bourbon all over.
Nice bourbon. I'm getting a little bit of almost like a butterscotch type of deal.
Yeah, kind of a butterscotch, but it's a solid butterscotch, but it's bourbon all over.
Yeah, definitely. The bourbon comes through nicely. There's not any hop-like aroma in here at all. Just kind of real clean, malty. The bourbon, butterscotch, kind of toffee, like aroma is pretty.
Very pleasant aroma.
Yeah, I've always thought the aroma of this beer is fantastic. All right, the aroma on the Bourbon Barrel Stout. Tons of coffee.
Wow, that's coffee everywhere.
Yes, a huge coffee. I also get a buttery type of smell in here. I don't know if I want to say butterscotch again, but there's like this buttery aroma to it, like
almost like a pastry kind of a buttery.
Yeah, it's definitely there.
But there's it's like almost like you opened up a can of coffee and stuck your nose.
Yeah, coffee is by far. There's a hint of bourbon there, and I think that's where that buttery aroma is coming from. A little bit of oak. Really nice, really clean, fresh bourbon.
Kind of almost like a silky taste to it. I mean, it's such a fresh tasting beer. You get great, you get some great bourbon, but you also just get this. They contrast with this sweetness to it.
The tannins from the barrel, like the wood, is there for sure. Just a real interesting. I don't know of many beers this light in character that are stuck in bourbon barrels. Like I said, they don't stick them in there for very long, but they don't have to. It's such a light beer. Just that little bit of time spent in the bourbon barrels gives this beer such an interesting and unique character.
You get a lot more subtle flavors out of this beer than you get out of a lot of beers that are aged in bourbon barrels.
I totally agree. The subtle flavors in this beer I've loved since the first time I tried it. All right, shall we? The stout show.
Sorry, I had to smell it.
That's fine.
Wow. Still coffee all up front.
Ton of coffee. Again, that buttery flavor, to me, almost like a buttered popcorn comes out in this behind the coffee. That's
what it reminded me of going, like, if you ever have one of those buttered popcorn Jelly Belly jelly beans. It's kind of right underneath there.
Yep.
You do get a little bit of bourbon on the back end, but it's not as strong as I expected it to be.
No, it really isn't. It really isn't. The coffee, I would say that this is a coffee stout more than a bourbon barrel aged stout.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a hint of bourbon. And that makes me wonder, do they leave this in only as long as they leave the pale ale in?
Yeah, that was something I would like to know. As a coffee stout alone, aside from the barrel aging, it's pretty interesting though. First of all, brewing it with coffee and then aging it also on coffee, I think you get a little bit of a different coffee character than you get on a lot of beers that are just brewed with coffee. You definitely get a more coffee taste, and by that I mean more like coffee the beverage. Not the beer.
And almost like a cold pressed coffee, like a iced coffee. You know. All right. For my rating on the Kentucky Bourbon Barrel Ale, I'm going to give it a 4.25 out of 5. I think it's a really great beer. You really can't compare it to anything else because there is really nothing to compare it to. When this beer is at its freshest, I think it's the best. The bourbon does fade because of the limited amount of time it spends in the barrels. The bourbon doesn't hang out in here forever. I've had fresher bottles than this that I feel have even a little bit more bourbon. This is still very good. It's still very good, but I'm going 4.25 with this one. What do you think?
I was thinking the same thing, 4.25 out of 5. This is a fantastic beer. I mean, just the uniquity of it by itself puts it in a different category of beer. But just the kind of flavors you get in this beer, like I said, you get all kinds of just complex flavors that you don't get out of a lot of other beers that are bourbon barrel aged just because it is so light. And I think that really makes it something that if you have the opportunity to, you should try to find a couple of bottles and just see what other kind of flavors you can get out of a bourbon barrel aged beer.
What do you think of the stout? I'll let you go first on the stout.
The stout? To be honest, I expected a little more bourbon flavor out of the stout.
I did too.
It's a pretty solid coffee stout. Again, because it is, both brewed with and aged on coffee, you get some coffee flavors that you don't normally get out of coffee beers. That being said, it is kind of on the thin side. I would enjoy a little more bourbon flavor out of it. I'd give it a 3.75 out of 5, I think.
I'm going to go one notch lower and give this a 3.5. I think it's a pretty good beer. Like you said, it's a better coffee stout than it is a bourbon barrel stout. And bourbon barrel stout, I don't know if you can see it, but that's what's in big letters right there. And so, to me, I feel like however long they left this in the barrels, they should have added another month or two to it. That's just my personal opinion. There's a lot of coffee in it, and I don't know if I like that buttery flavor underneath or not. All right, guys, until next time. Cheers. All right, guys, until next time. Cheers.